Ever since the series Yellowstone hit our televisions, ranching, and Montana ranching in particular, has been at the forefront of a lot of our minds and conversations. Even though the Duttons and their huge ranch, the Yellowstone, are fictional, they do depict a real way of life. Ranchers are some of the hardest working, most independent people in the world, and they also are working really hard to provide the world with food as we speak. But how do these ranchers actually make money? That's the question. You've heard a lot of stuff through the media. Today we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what these ranchers do and how they make money. This is Life in the West. We're going to break this down into three parts. First, raising cattle. How do you raise cattle all year round? Because that's what they make money on. Number two, how much money do they make for raising those cattle? And number three, how did they get the land and the cattle in the first place? So let's start with number one. Number one is raising cattle. So first of all, when I say cattle, I'm just referring to any cow, calf, or steer that a rancher would raise. Altogether, they're known as cattle. So to start raising cattle, the first step is calving. Calving season is typically in the spring. The area and the type of land determine a lot about what you do and how you make money there. So I'm going to restrain all of my examples and my numbers to Montana because that's what I'm familiar with. That's also where the show Yellowstone is actually filmed, and the fictional ranch Yellowstone is supposed to be. Montana, ranchers either calve starting in January or March or April. Now, it's always a risk versus reward thing. If you start in January, you're going to have bigger calves by the time you sell them in October. But that's if they survive, because January in Montana can be absolutely nasty. So if you have a rough winter, you're going to end up with a lot of calves with missing ears and tails, if not dead, because when it's 30 below with a 20-mile-an-hour wind chill, that's hard to deal with when you have wet calves plopping out all over the place and that stuff. Here's a brand new one right here. This is what we call a late calver, because this calf was born a couple days ago. And this is August. Whoa, cow. It's a little heifer calf. Just like that. She's watching me. You gotta watch the mom, they can get stomped to death. This thing is like a day old. Very, very new calf. She just dropped that yesterday. And this is August, so this is a big calf too yet. And she didn't need any help. Yeah. You're curly. Curly, yeah, curly. Yeah, little guy. Hey, little guy. Say hi to the people in the camera. Say hi to the people in the camera. There you go, buddy. Little woolly boy. Too bad I didn't have an ear tag with me. I'd tag you. Calving is very labor intensive because cows might have an easy time of calving, but they might have a difficulty. And if they have a problem with calving, then without human intervention, they will either lose the calf or they'll die themselves. So if you're not around all the time during calving, you can have a catastrophe. So as soon as the calves are born, they're tagged and vaccinated, and they're turned out. They're usually fed some hay for a while after that, and then when they're about a month old, they're all run in to a pen, separated off from their mothers, and branded. They get another vaccination as well, and that's for their own health. Without that vaccine, they would really have a low chance of making it. There's a shorthorn cow right here. You can tell she's watching me. Oh, stay here. Yeah. What are you doing there, shorthorn? So a rancher can't stop and just think about just this year. He has to think about the next year and the next year. So in about June, he turns out the bulls with the cows to get them bred again. Bulls are really an expensive necessity when it comes to ranching. They're anywhere from $2,000 to $25,000 depending on the bull, and you can only run them and use them for about 5 to 6 years. If you keep using the same bulls every year, what happens is eventually they start breeding their daughters and granddaughters, and that's not good. After the bulls have been with the cows for a little while, usually the cows are then separated off and go out to summer pasture. And they're pastured all the way through until October, when they're brought back in. At that time, the calves are old enough to be taken off their mothers, and they're separated and weaned, and then they're taken to auction or sold to a buyer. Now that's not the end of these calves. They're only about 6 months old. So somebody buys them and runs them as yearlings, which means they run them on pasture somewhere until they're about 1 year and 9 months old. At that time, they're then taken to a feedlot for a short period of time before they're butchered. Then the cows are taken back out to pasture. And typically, if you don't get a whole bunch of snow, you can pasture them until about the 1st of January sometimes, which you want to pasture them as long as possible, because as soon as you start having to feed hay, the expense column really starts going up. So let's get into number 2. What kind of money are they actually making when they sell these calves? Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here. How much are these ranchers actually making when they sell these calves? So to figure that, we need to figure our gross sales minus our expenses. I know that seems like so basic, it's ridiculous, but you'd be really surprised how many people I talk to that only give me the gross sales number and don't ever figure expenses when they're looking at something like this, which tells you absolutely nothing. So for example, we're going to use a ranch that I found that's for sale on the internet by Billings, Montana. So this ranch is roughly 4,000 acres, and they run 200 pairs year-round. So let's use those numbers. That's about 20 acres per cow, which is, it might be a little optimistic on some years, but we're going to use it for this example. There you go, buddy. So if you have 200 calves, you're going to sell 200 of them, right? Wrong. If you sell every calf you have every year, it won't be long before you don't have any cows left, because all the cows you have are getting older every year. So you have to keep a certain percentage of your female calves as what we call replacements to replace the older ones that you're going to sell to keep your herd at an average age of like 5 to 20, depending on where you're at. So if you have 200 cows and you save 30% of them, that means you have 170 to sell. So if you sell 170 calves at today's prices, which are actually pretty high, it's about $1.83 a pound, that gets you $177,000 for the year. Doesn't sound too bad, does it? So now let's figure expenses. Expenses include things like taxes, hired help, fuel costs, vaccinations and medicines, hay in the winter time. and anything else that you have to pay for to raise these cattle. Let's add these expenses up for this particular hypothetical ranch that's 4,000 acres. These are the expenses that I have. Fuel cost, and these are pretty close to reality as well. Fuel cost, $23,000. Electric bills, $14,000. You might wonder what electric bills are for. In the winter time up here, you have to heat your water. I mean, you can't heat the water, but you keep it from freezing with electric heaters in it. Your waters have to be frost-free, that kind of thing. During calving, you have a lot of lights going on, warming barns, things like that. That costs a lot of electricity. Horse care, because you have horses around, $5,000 for that. ATV upkeep, $1,500 bucks. That's probably pretty cheap, but you know, once they get going for 200 head, you don't need, you know, that much for all on your own ground. Fencing, $12,000. I tried to knock this one down some, but the cost of steel lately has totally killed this thing. So even if you're just replacing just a small part of your fencing every year, which a lot of people don't do and end up completely run into the ground after 20 years and have to replace the whole thing, you're going to be about 10 to 12 grand a year. Employees, I put $0 because you can't afford to have employees, otherwise you wouldn't make any money. So you just have to have kids and hope that they'll help you down the road. Vaccines and medication. This is for the calves and the cows. Both of them are vaccinated and dewormed every year. And if you add that up, that's about $10,000. Hay, $55,000. That is hay from figuring hay from January 1st through calving season, which isn't really realistic unless, this number's not realistic unless you raise the hay yourself. If you have to buy it, it'd be triple that. Bulls, $4,000. You have to sell bulls, like I said, every 5 to 6 years and buy new ones. They're very costly, so the difference never comes out the same because you're buying younger bulls and selling older bulls. So there's a difference in cost there. Land taxes is around $10,000. I have no idea what that is. We're just going to throw that in there for that amount of land is what I mean. So your gross sales is $177,000. Your expenses are $134,000. Your total profit for that year, if nothing went wrong, was $42,500. Now, one problem with this is we did not figure any loss. So if a grizzly bear, you know, people ask me, oh, what's the big deal? You shouldn't have your cows where grizzly bears are if you have, you know, a grizzly bear eat your calf. This is a big deal. Every time a grizzly bear kills a calf, it eats your pocketbook, and there isn't a lot there to spare if you see. I mean, we're talking a tight budget as it is. So wolves killing your livestock, grizzly bears killing your livestock, sometimes they just die for no reason. So that's something I'm not really figuring in here, but you know, for this hypothetical example, we're not using that. Even without that, your total profit is $42,000 a year. So you can see why ranchers don't pay taxes, because they're not making enough to pay taxes. If they buy a new pickup, it's under the ranch and they write it off, so they don't have to pay any taxes. And that's another thing that's not in here. It's part of, it has to come out of their income sometimes. The reason they buy a new pickup though is because they have to have something that's reliable. They have to be able to get where they need to go right now. Time is money, or means losing a calf or a cow or something like that. So their vehicles need to be fairly reliable. Ranchers run large amounts of money through their business, but they don't keep a lot of it. It doesn't end up staying in their business. They bring a lot in and throw a lot right back out because their expenses are so large. And this is, as you can see, this is a 4,000 acre ranch. This could support maybe one family, really. This is all that's supporting, because your paycheck is $42,000 for that year. Now, you do have all your fuel paid for, probably most of your food, so that helps quite a bit. But if you hire somebody, or if you have a second family that you have to take care of, like the older generation is still on the ranch, that's going to be a huge hit to that budget. To begin making money or losing money in ranching, you have to have some assets. Those assets are land and cattle. Those are the essential ones anyway. Now, in the people that I know, most of them got their start the same way that Kevin Costner did in the show Yellowstone, which is they inherited it from their grandfather. But if you didn't have a great-grandfather that settled here 100 years ago and to give you land and cattle, then you have the problem of getting started. So getting started in ranching means you have to purchase the land and the cattle. So I tried to find somewhere out at closer to eastern Montana that's less mountains, more just rangeland. And this is what I found. It's a 4,800 and something acre ranch. Now, 800 acres of that is in farmland, which is not relevant to our discussion. So what I did is I just took that off. So we're saying 4,000 acres. I took off the relative price of farmland. So now we're talking about buying 4,000 acres for $5 million. Now this doesn't include the cattle, but let's just see what that does. If you're buying a $5 million ranch, then you're going to have about a $432,000 payment every year if it's a 25-year loan. That doesn't add up very well if you use the numbers above and you're only making $42,000 a year. Even if Granddad gave it to you for free, like Kevin Costner's dad gave it to him in the show Yellowstone, it's not a money-making proposition. So how do ranchers make it? Well, they have more acres. It used to be you could raise a family on less cattle because the margin was about the same, or the cost and price was about the same, but living cost was way lower. Now living cost is so high that you actually have to have way more acres for a family to survive on. And people are living longer as well, so what you have now is one generation, the older generation is still on the farm or ranch when the younger generation takes over. So now there's two families at least living on there. You very rarely anymore see a lot of hired guys because there's not enough money left over after you pay the family to pay anybody to do any work. Diversify and more land. When people think, oh man, this rancher has so much land and he doesn't deserve it, maybe not, but he can't make it without that much land. It just doesn't pencil out. So to me, it's pretty clear. I think you can be a cowboy as long as you don't expect to live on very much. You can go find a job on a really big ranch somewhere and cowboy becoming a rancher, that's another thing. I think unless you go find the money somewhere else and don't expect to make an extraordinary living at it, it's pretty tough, which is why I came up with Cattle Kings. Cattle Kings is a blockchain game where you can buy and raise your own herd of cattle on your own land, all in your wallet. And the blockchain makes it so that you can own your assets just like you would in real life. I'm creating this game just so that people that may never get to experience the reality of ranching can at least learn about it in an educational and fun way, and maybe earn a little money as well. So if you're interested in seeing what Cattle Kings is all about, finding out if it's maybe something you'd be interested in, go over to cattlekings.io. You can go down below. I'll leave a link down below, and make sure you sign up for the updates because it's not complete yet, but if you like the idea and you want to get started right at the first beginning, then I will let everybody know that's signed up on the website, and they'll be the first to have a crack at the NFT cattle that are available there. Well, that's it for today's lesson on how ranchers make money from life in the West. I'm Trinity Vandenaker. Until next time, God bless you and God bless America.